Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. My name is Paul Klingen, and I'm your host. I'm a former advertising professional turned fitness coach where I use my E4 fitness method to help people with their training, nutrition, recovery, and mental performance. You'll hear all the different tips, tricks, and research that I use for myself and my clients to see results in those fields. I'll also bring on experts so that we can deep dive into specific topics. Ultimately, the goal is to help you take your fitness to the next level so that you can live the life that you want to live. So buckle up, take some notes, and let's roll. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. My name is Paul Klingen, and I am your host. And I've got a really special, fun, definitely deep. It's going to challenge you in a few ways, but I'm also going to be diving into some more authentic, raw parts of myself that I haven't really shared on this podcast. Anyone who knows me personally knows that sometimes in my past I have not had a filter. I can go pretty wild, and this will be my story of how I recalibrated my relationship with alcohol to start achieving things that I wanted in my life. And this has been a lot of work that I've been doing with my clients and diving deeper and getting to some of those layer 2, layer 3, layer 4 stories and blockers for people so that they can unlock what they want out of their fitness and their ultimately their life. So a couple months back, the creator of Steak Life, which is a men's lifestyle media channel, reached out and we just started having a conversation. He was like, hey, I really think that you could provide a lot of value from a content standpoint. And I was like, yeah, I absolutely would love to. And so we went to the drawing board, and this piece really spoke to me because it's something that I know a lot of guys specifically struggle with. And for a lot of people, they never get off this wagon and they never really achieve the things that they want to achieve. And so I was like, you know what? It might be a little polarizing, but at the same time, I would rather have a line in the sand and be like, hey, if you want to make a change, here's a route and an option for you. So that's where the recalibration comes from. But I'm going to start from the top of the article. I'm going to give a little bit more context, a little bit more color to the different stories, the different examples that I have in it. But I'll take you through, one, my story, two, kind of the science behind how alcohol is going to slow you down from a training standpoint, nutrition standpoint, recovery standpoint, mental performance standpoint. I'll introduce a really cool concept called the self-determination theory in that mental performance section, and then I'll wrap it up. So if you want to just fast forward and like, hey, Paul, tell me what I need to do. I'll wrap it up with 4 practical steps that you can actually take to moderate your alcohol consumption so that it's not getting in the way of what you really want. So without further ado, let's roll. So I remember my first beer because it was on the campus of Washington State University. It was August 2009. I was in Pullman, and I was there for a recruiting visit. Anyone who's not familiar with me, I played baseball at Washington State. I was a catcher, and my host player was going into his junior year. So when I played with him, he was a senior, but he was a pitcher. Great guy. We had a lot of good times together. But I remember sitting down on the couch, and he says, hey, do you want a beer? Do you drink? And in my head, I'm like, oh, shit. And I'm like, yeah, all the time, man. Of course. That's all I do in high school. So I responded that way, knowing in my head, I was like, oh, man, what is he going to say if I say no? This is a college guy. And so, basically 2 seconds later, I'm handed a Bud Light Lime. I knock back my first beer. And one of the things that I'm sure if you follow college sports know is when they bring recruits in, they don't show them a bad time. And so those first 2 nights at Washington State were a good time. They were also hungover times the next day. And, that was kind of my baptism into what would be the world of drinking, wanting to fit in, and, like I said, hangovers. So obviously the physiological ramifications that follow a lack of moderation. And that would be when I was 18. I was probably 17 at the time, but obviously you get to college, you're 18. And so the next 2 nights, or not the next 2 nights, really the next decade, I would have some sort of like, oh, I'm going to stop, I'm going to slow down, and then you go back into it. Or it's like, all right, I'm just going to have one or two, and then all of a sudden that pendulum that you've held back just swings over and you have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, however many it is. You black out, you do whatever happens when, right, you drink too much. And those stumbles, they show up in different ways. So from a physical standpoint, there's the pain of working out 6 days a week. And you're like, man, like nothing's really showing. I feel like I should have more muscle. I feel like I should be leaner. And why isn't it working for me? There's the embarrassment of being the drunk guy at the company party. My second or third day at my second internship out of college was at an ad agency called Cullen Weber. And I started there on a Tuesday. Thursday night was the summer party. That Friday, I was in the bathroom stall letting out some demons. And one of the creative directors peeked up over the stall and he's like, oh my God, the intern's puking. And I thought I was going to get fired. I thought there's no way that day 2 throwing up in the bathroom, like I was sweating so much. That was probably one of the worst days of work in my life. So anyway, there's the embarrassment of that, right? I'm sure some of you can relate to having way too many, taking unlimited a little bit too liberally at these paid events. And then third is, the shame of saying things that you don't mean. And that could be to someone you're dating, that could be to a friend, but there's a lot of different ways that basically drinking too much show up and cause frustration. And before you go any further, one, I'll say you're supposed to make mistakes in life. 2, this is definitely not a do not drink article. It's not a do not drink statement. But there's one thing that I really remember in college, my pitching coach saying, and it was that there's expensive experience and there's inexpensive experience. You can learn from the older guys, or you can learn the hard and expensive way yourself. So this article that I wrote in this podcast really is my expensive experience in the hope that this will be some inexpensive experience for you. It's the story of how I recalibrated my consumption so that it was more in alignment with what I wanted out of life. Like I said, this isn't a don't drink. You must, abstinence is the way. Absolutely not. Far from it. But I will say, pendulum swinging in both directions is rarely the best approach, right? Whether you're restricting or just going all the way. However, if you do choose to not drink, sobriety is fantastic if that's the best decision for you. That's really only a decision that you can make and maybe the people really close to you. The goal of this piece of content is to give you the tools to use around alcohol so that you can unlock your health, physical, fitness goals. But don't be confused. This is going to unlock basically whatever you want to do in life at a bunch of different levels. Health, wealth, finances, whatever it is. So maybe you're listening to this and your health's in the worst place it's been in years, 7, 8, 15, 20 years, whatever. Maybe COVID slowed your roll and the last year and a half really knocked you off your rocker. Or maybe you're tired of operating below your potential and you're capable of a lot more. Wherever you are, taking what you learned from this podcast is going to help you take the next step on the proverbial ladder and get out of that vicious wheel of frustration, really. So, as I mentioned before, I went to Washington State, very much a party school, baptized in Busch Light. But upon graduation, the excessive drinking definitely didn't stop. I would spend most of my mid-20s acted like we had just won the national championship, which, for the record, any Cougs out there, or Huskies, or really anyone familiar with the Pac-12, knows that Washington State is a hop, skip, and a jump from a national championship. But that didn't matter. If it was a wedding, birthday party, work happy hour, simply just a Friday night in the city, I would really go 0 to 100 pretty quick. And I like to think of drinking as riding a bike downhill. If you have a couple drinks, you can absolutely control the bike. If you do fall, you might pick up a couple scratches, but you'll dust yourself off and carry back on. If you are getting after it, getting hammered, whatever verbiage you like to use, that front tire starts to wobble. And when that front tire starts to wobble, it's only a matter of time before you seriously crash and eat shit. So I've got a great example of this when I was traveling in Thailand. I would have been probably 26, 27 at the time. And it was almost a pretty serious crash. I was heading to the full moon party, which is a really good time. Wish I remembered it. Anyway, so it started off with me and a couple friends. One girl that I knew before I got to Thailand, went up to visit with her, and then a couple guys from, where were they from? I'll just say Canada. Just two random Canadians. They're nice enough guys. But anyway, we get word that there's this really cool hostel, and we got to go to it because it's a party hostel, and we got a pregame, right? Pretty tame stuff. So we get there, we get the face paint on, we start having, I don't even know what drinks we were having, but we start having them. And then soon enough, at some point, I'm sure Avicii Levels was playing, and that beer pong table that had these like 90-pound girls from London on top of it was looking pretty appealing. So I was like, oh, I'll go dance on it. I think I got like 10 seconds into standing on that table before I fell through and lacerated my knee. And yeah, there was a lot of blood. There was no hospital on the island, though. But luckily, my friend who I was with from the States, shout out to Amanda, she was a nurse, so she was able to completely wrap my leg up, and I was walking around with this like Vietnam World War II bandage around my knee, just still having a good time. So bandaged and buzzed, hopping like the back of a truck to the festival, and I remember getting to the festival. I remember losing my friends, and after that, I don't really remember much, which is why I was like, man, like probably was a pretty fun time for most people. But I just know that I woke up the next day on the couch in the lobby of a hostel that I wasn't staying at. And funny enough, it was the hostel that we went to. So at some point, I went home by myself, probably in the back of a truck, and I was like, oh, I'll just pass out on this couch. And so it was kind of like my own personal version of the Hangover movie, with the key distinction being I was by myself on an island in Southeast Asia with no access to anything. I think I had my phone, so bless being able to find the phone. But I look back on all my trips abroad and traveling and all these amazing memories of my life, and this is definitely like a story that could easily end up on Friday beers, Tuesday texts, or some sort of social media thing. But this wasn't the only situation where I had a little bit too much. There were other situations. This is just a good example. And I look back now and I'm like, man, that easily could have ended up in a really bad situation. Could have gotten robbed, arrested, injured, or, I mean, even killed. There's no way I can control that when you are blacked out in the back of a truck. But what's sad, I think, is that when those kind of things happen, like I just mentioned, like the tragedy, it's usually followed with some form of like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. If only there was something we could do. If only we could have done this, this, and this. Alcohol is so scary. And then a night later, we're off celebrating or partying or doing some sort of drinking, like right after. It's like we say, oh my God, this is so terrible. This is so scary. But then we cross over that line that's flirting with celebration and fun and a good time with like, you don't even realize you've crossed that line to where it's like, oh wow, this is now scary. And like I said earlier, this isn't a indictment on alcohol. Like I'm not campaigning to go cancel it. You see a lot of on Netflix, what are they? Documentaries, right? Where it's like takes you through how terrible meat is or how terrible this is. And then at the end, it's like the only solution is to go one pendulum swing all the way over to the other side. And it's like, that's not a good alternative. Like, let's try and find some sort of middle. And that's, again, what this is, recalibrating to find some moderation. But I'll say that I just want to reframe this because so much of how we look at events in society, whether it's a holiday, a wedding, a birthday party, like the open bar is what everyone needs. The going absolutely crazy and having like the story at the end is what's celebrated. And while that line, or while it might be funny, like the line between funny and tragic is sometimes so small you don't even realize you've crossed it. However, most of the time, I would say it doesn't show up as like a tragic lightning strike, like I mentioned earlier, with like the robbed, arrested, injured, ending fatally, which is super tragic. Usually it shows up in the form of a leaky faucet. And that's where I feel like a lot of people either listening to this or maybe people that you know sit. Because for years, drinking a bunch is going to seem benign. But then you're going to look back 10 years, 20 years, And as those years accumulate, you look back and you're like, wow, I wasted so much potential. And you realize the real tragedy is when you come to terms with the fact that you never really achieved what you really wanted, and it was because you lived a shallow and distracted life. And before I get a bunch of hate mail for attacking you or alcohol or whatever, I'm not saying you are a shallow person if you drink. I'm saying things like alcohol and social media and binge watching 7 episodes or 7 shows on Netflix, those are all designed to keep you shallow because they pacify you from having to feel what you really are feeling and then going and addressing that. So when I say shallow, that's what I mean. You never actually get deep to do anything. Like, think of like a well that goes deep. Like, you're actually able to dive deep into either what's bothering you or dive deep into something to the point to where you're going and making like a huge significant change either in your life or in the lives around you, in a business or athletically or whatever it is. So then this is the part where I dive into my recalibration, my transition. It was right before my 27th birthday when I actually hired a life coach, and I was like, I'm going to become a personal trainer. And it was funny because what I remember telling him, I was like, if I could just make $2,000 a month as side hustle money, I don't know how that's going to happen, but boy, that would be it. And it just goes to show I love reminding myself of that, to remind myself how small I used to think, how much that has grown, and how much I'm probably still thinking small and can grow and think even bigger. But anyway, so prior to that, a few months that kind of led up to that, I had gotten into yoga. That's where you get down dog athletics. That's where that came from. I got really into the meditation and the mindfulness, and it really shifted my perspective on life and what I wanted. So between the meditation, the yoga, the slowing down, the journaling, the working with a life coach, started eating better. Next thing I knew, I was like, man, I'm going to take an entire month off drinking. I remember the Instagram post. I remember the day. It was like, man, this is my first month I have not drank since before college, which at 27, that's like 9 years, which I think is pretty crazy to have never gone 30 days over the course of, I'm going to do quick math in my head, 350, we'll just say times 8. This is bad math, but we'll just call it, 3,000 days, whatever. So I've never gone 30 in those 3,000 without stopping. So anyway, I went an entire month off. And for me, that was the first time where that pendulum got recalibrated closer to a center, because my consumption after that was much more in alignment with what I wanted physically. Physically, I was trying to lose the last 10, 15, whatever pounds and have my body look and reflect what I felt like the effort and what I was capable of was. But over the years, as I've learned more about health and fitness and training and nutrition and everything in between, I've come to realize like how crucial tapering alcohol consumption is if you want to achieve any remotely high levels or even moderately high levels of performance, whether that's sports, running a half marathon, a marathon, getting really, really, really strong, aesthetics, losing weight, being super lean, having a bunch of muscle, and really just overall longevity. And once I did this, like it was almost like night and day. Like the results came, and I was like, holy cow, like this is crazy. Like that was the only thing I changed, but it had so many things, which I'm going to get into from a science standpoint, that were kind of these like chain reactions that then unlocked a lot of things for me that I just like couldn't figure out. And looking back, I definitely have yoga to thank, because that slowed me down, allowed me to get really quiet, get really still, dive to layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and be like, holy cow, I am not down with sweating out Friday night in a hot yoga class Saturday morning. I recognized that I had a version of myself that had much more ambition and had a much bigger purpose. And so over the last 3 years, and maybe a little bit more, but during all this time coaching, I've coached hundreds of people. I've taught at Barry's, I've taught at Lululemon, I've taught yoga, I've done nutrition coaching. So just like ran the whole gambit on kind of what you can do from a health and fitness standpoint. And I've come to realize there's kind of overlapping 4 things that you need. You need a good, strong training foundation and structured training program. You need to have your nutrition dialed in. Doesn't have to be crazy, but it needs to have some structure so that you can have the freedom to have the food that you want. You got to recover. You got to sleep. You got to make sure that your nervous system and your metabolism aren't completely zapped. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. And then there needs to be elements of mental performance where you're working on shifting your purpose, your core values, which I'll get to a little bit later. But really, it's just creating that relationship with your future self. And anyone that's ever had fitness or finance goals, right? You're saying, oh, I'm paying my future self. I'm saving so that my 40 or 50 or 60-year-old me has a better life. That's what you're doing from a fitness standpoint. So it's just that visualization and being able to see and make that real. That's where the mental performance piece comes in. But one of the most common conversations I have with people, with clients, is just on how alcohol is slowing them down in maybe one of these areas, more than likely though in multiple of these areas. So what I want to use the next section of this podcast on is diving into how alcohol is going to impact you from a training standpoint, nutrition standpoint, recovery standpoint. This one's huge, 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 huge. Literally, even if you don't work out, this one's huge. And then mental performance as well. All right, so this next section is going to be a little bit science heavy. So if you like that, absolutely stay tuned. Otherwise, just fast forward a little bit and you can get to the 4 tips on how to recalibrate and actual practical steps. So diving into training first, if you have seen Beer Fest, and I don't even think this is dating myself, but I'm pretty sure that came out 10 or 15 years ago now, because I was coming up with examples and I was like, man, is this movie really that old? Anyway, you've probably quoted the line, I'm better when I'm drunk, 5, 10, 15, 20 times, whatever it is. But from a scientific standpoint, the science definitely does not line up with that. So following training sessions, the body's going to need to replenish muscle glycogen stores, stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and restore lost fluid. So let's dive into muscle glycogen stores real quick. They are the primary fuel source for any intense lifting sessions, whether you are bodybuilding, doing CrossFit, or simply getting after it in your home gym, playing sports. You need those muscle glycogen stores. Our muscles thrive off glycogen. Studies have shown that alcohol can potentially reduce the uptake and storage of glycogen. Although it's not 100%, it potentially has less of an impact if those stores were never really depleted. So, for example, if you go in train back-to-back days, let's say you have an upper-lower split, and you get after it on your Monday upper day, then you go get drinks, your Tuesday lower day, you're much more likely to see a dip in performance because you haven't had a chance to replenish those stores. Whereas if you never lost those muscle glycogen stores in the first place, maybe you went and drank, but you already had a day or two prior of not lifting, hypothetically, maybe that's where you see less of a dip. But ultimately, that dip's going to depend a lot on a lot of different variables. So you're looking at genetics, gender, amount of alcohol ingested, body mass, nutrition, which is why sometimes people will be like, oh, yeah, I drink, but it doesn't affect me, which it's not true. It's not really the case. What you're probably doing is you're looking at what is 80% for you and calling that your best. So you're operating at 80%, but because you've never allowed yourself to get to 85, 90, 95, you're calling that your best. So I like to say if you have bad genetics, like nothing you can do about it other than just outwork everyone, and you'll definitely get there because a lot of people don't want to outwork you. If you have good genetics, and this is me talking to myself 5, 10 years ago, like stop playing small and live up to your potential. Like if you have the potential and the ability to do something great and you're just fine playing, C+ sports or C+ job, career, like whatever, just because you started at second base, like, come on, you're letting literally everyone down, including yourself. So next up, you got muscle protein synthesis, which is the body's adaptive response post-exercise to building muscle mass. That is building that lean muscle tissue that so many people want. So let's just say you go straight from the gym to happy hour, and instead of having your protein-rich dinner or your protein-rich smoothie, you trade it for some fries or a beer. That's definitely going to inhibit, to some degree, muscle growth and repair. And even if you have let's say your target protein is 200 grams for the day, and then you go and drink, there's still some research that shows that muscle protein synthesis will significantly decrease. So really kind of look at it as like, all right, you just had a great workout. Are you going to put SpaghettiOs in your Ferrari or your nice sports car or truck or whatever you got, or are you going to actually put some nice clean gasoline in the tank? You know what I'm saying? Then we got fluid intake. So it's no secret alcohol is a diuretic, inhibiting the production of vasopressin, which is actually a hormone that plays a role in the regulation of water excretion. So following a workout, you're likely to sweat out a good amount of water, especially if it's as hot and humid as it is in San Diego. I feel like I sweat so much more. Anyway, side tangent. You need to rehydrate so that your body has enough water to break down proteins more efficiently. So if you're taking anything from a training standpoint seriously, a constant focus has to be on getting your body to recover so that each training day can be as effective as possible and so that you can show up the next day ready to roll. And a really good metaphor for this is if you've ever gone to a arcade and you sit down at one of those Sunset Cruisers or Rush or whatever it is that you got to go through checkpoints in your driving cars. Think of recovery, and I'll get to recovery in a second, but this is just really good. I mentioned it. The first time you go through the checkpoint, boom, 45 seconds. You got so much time. And then maybe you crash a little bit, you get spun out, you get to the checkpoint again, 30 seconds. Boom, now that ticker's going down. And then the next time you go through, you got 20 seconds, then 10, then 5, and then all of a sudden it's game over, right? Now you got to put in another dollar or however many quarters you got to put in. That's what's happening from a recovery standpoint. Eventually you're going to hit a wall and you're just not going to be able to recover from what it is that you've been doing because you've been going from 70% recovery, 60, 50, 40, 30, and alcohol is going to disrupt that from a training standpoint and a recovery standpoint a ton. But really what it comes down to is the mindset that you want to have when you're working towards something, and the lack of the mindset is going to weed out the bodies that adapt and grow and the ones that don't. And if you're listening to this and you're like, man, for the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, I've been going to the gym really diligently and nothing has changed, you got to go and address the other things that haven't changed as well, right? Because if you have the exact same inputs and expect different outputs, that's crazy, man. Can't do that. Basically, if your recovery's trash and you're too hungover to put forth any good, solid effort in a training session, you're almost going to be wasting your time. At least you'll get a good sweat. Now we dive into nutrition. So this is a huge one, and I'm going to speak mostly to weight loss. But from a nutrition perspective, alcohol is going to play a huge role in negatively impacting your body composition. Again, it's always going to play a role in genetics and muscle mass and male, female, but trying to optimize here, people. So if you're familiar with macros, you'll know that carbs and protein have 4 calories per gram. Fats have 9 calories per gram. Alcohol is going to have 7 calories per gram. So you're looking at a 100-calorie White Claw, and you're like, oh, it's only 2 grams of carbs. The other 92 calories, give or take, are going to be alcohol calories. However, alcohol isn't directly going to cause you to gain weight. Those calories from alcohol isn't like that automatically gets stored as fat. If calories remain at maintenance levels, heck, even if calories are in a deficit, you can lose weight week over week. Where alcohol does play a number on your waistline, though, is going to be how your body responds to it. So, like I said earlier, none of those 7 calories per gram are converted into anything, especially not glycogen. And the presence of it is going to really slow down several processes that I mentioned in the training section and just overall. So you're looking at a slower digestion overall from nutrients. You're looking at a body that needs to prioritize the removal of toxins in the bloodstream. And then your body also needs to replenish salt that you're losing from the dehydrating effects of alcohol. And all while dealing with the salt cravings that complement the sugary beverages that beer, wine, mixed drinks come with. So think to yourself, you're having beer, wine, mixed drinks. Like, where do you also get salty foods? Boom, bars, restaurants. So you're going to crave and binge eat a lot of the appetizers at the bar because your body is digging the salt. Sweet potato fries, those chicken tendies, the pizza, nachos, and just about every other food on the menu is really an amalgamation of sugar, salt, and fat, all things that our brain love getting. So think about it this way. If you had gone out, stopped at 2 Corona Lights and left, damage is 200 calories. Boom. Absolutely. You can recover from that. No problem. But let's say you add another 800 to 1,200 calories with food that really you were like, shit, whatever, let's just get it. So during that time, you also probably got another drink to water it down, So what started out with a 200 calorie happy hour is a 2,000 calorie evening. And that's before you go to the next bar, next club, or head home and throw a quesadilla in the microwave, which I've done. So no shame there. But ultimately, from a weight loss standpoint, it's a numbers game. At the end of the day, weight management is going to be energy balance. So if you have, let's just say, simple numbers here, 14,000 calories is maintenance for the week. And you have 2 weekend days of 4,000 calories where you're getting after it. That leaves you with 6,000 calories for the remaining 5 days. That is 1,200 calories. That is not a lot. Anything over that 14,000 is going to eventually store as fat. Anything under is going to be, leading to some levels of weight loss. And, we can get into the weeds of science, and there's going to be maybe a range where it's like 14,100 and 13,900. It's going to keep you relatively stable because the metabolism's good at finding homeostasis. But basically, if you keep spending over budget, you're going to add layers of fat. If you keep spending under budget, you're going to break down that savings account. So all this is going to say that it's not alcohol that's directly, specifically making you gain weight. It's the inhibition that it creates that leads to the excessive calorie consumption. So without stealing the thunder of recovery, which I feel like I keep coming back to, I came to in the training section as well, your hangover the next day is also going to play a huge role on your appetite. And this is due in large part to your sleep being negatively affected by the overconsumption of alcohol. So let's just get into recovery, actually. I would argue that recovery and alcohol's impact on it ends up being the most impactful on your health and fitness because it's the linchpin that sets you up for success or an uphill battle. So you might be thinking, but Paul, every time I drink, I pass out. Have you ever passed out from drinking? I have. However, that 10 hours that you got after a night going out, falling asleep at 2 a.m. is not good restful sleep. So first, let's take a look at how alcohol disrupts sleep and how that impacts you physically at a hormonal level. There are 4 stages of sleep. Anyone who has like a whoop will geek out over this, but there's going to be stage 3, also known as deep sleep or slow wave sleep, and it's critical for recovery and growth. Alcohol is going to disrupt slow wave sleep and prevent us from producing a majority of growth hormone while also contributing to higher cortisol levels. Growth hormone is great for both fat loss and muscle growth, while cortisol, which is what gets released when we are super, super stressed, causes a lot of muscle breakdown, fat deposition, basically deposits fat. I'm reading from the article. And it's even going to decrease immune function. What's like, how important is our immunity? We just went through COVID, people. Come on. And so anyway, whether you're trying to build muscle or lose fat, excessive alcohol consumption is going to prevent you from getting the gains you want and burning the fat you want, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. Then we got to look at REM sleep, which is crushed by alcohol as well. Drinking, even in mild quality, is going to prevent you from fully accessing the mentally restorative part of sleep. So think of slow wave sleep as physical, REM sleep as mental. So over the lack of time, a lack of REM sleep is going to lead to sleep deprivation. And that sleep deprivation is going to have several debilitating effects. So first and foremost, you got decreased memory consolidation. So think of like technical skills in your brain, being able to imprint them and learn them. So what you learned at work or what you learned in a given sport is not going to be as fully downloaded as it would had you got the complete REM sleep that you needed. Then you have incredible cravings for carbs, specifically to increase energy. Your body and your brain craves hangover food because the brain is really smart. Your biology will always override willpower, and it knows how it can get quick sources to increase blood sugar and get energy quick. Then we have decreased motor skills. So any golfers out there, if you ever wonder why your irons are trash or you're not so hot off the tee the next day, that is why your game is so erratic. Then you have a drop in body temperature. So that is the downregulation of organs. So that's going to play a role on your basal metabolic rate. And then, like I mentioned earlier, weakening of the immune system. So no need to highlight on how important having a strong immune system is for anyone who's been on planet Earth for the last 2 years. So you can see why sleep's a linchpin to success, not only in health and fitness, but think about this. If you are not getting good sleep, how are you performing at your job? How are you performing in the conversations that you're having with people, right? It's going to impact every single part of your life. And until the sleep gets cleaned up, you will continue to drive on, quotes, booze control throughout, however long it takes for you to slow it down and moderate. So rather than going into all the science on how alcohol can impact the mental health, mental wellness, mental performance of an individual, whatever you want to call it, I think we can just agree that what we saw in 2020 is a great example of how many people struggle from a mental health standpoint when isolation, alcohol, and a lack of connection with people are all present. We saw a lot of spikes in whether it's suicide ideation, anxiety, depression, whatever you want to throw into the bucket from a mental wellness standpoint. We definitely saw that spike in a year in which we saw alcohol consumption spike in a year when everyone's at home just sitting and drinking. So really alcohol can be used in a few different ways, but a lot of times it's to numb varying levels of anxiety and depression. Mental clarity goes out the window following excessive consumption, which leads to a vicious cycle of fog, negative internal chatter, and then rather than go and face that demon, you go and numb it again. So we all know alcohol leads to struggles. Rather than list the side effects and the data and how it affects this part of the brain and that part of the brain, I'd like to offer you a different perspective, a different approach, one that examines the alignment of core values, purpose, and daily action. So this is called the self-determination theory, and I'll link to the notes of the individuals who kind of came up with it. I don't have it off the top of my head. It's linked in the article, but it's an approach that assumes at our deepest levels as humans, we desire growth. We want to master challenges, and we want to integrate new experiences with our identity. It assumes that psychologically we want three things: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So competence is going to address the experience of feeling effective, mastering skills. Think of being able to complete a task at work, or being able to finally dunk a basketball or do a trick on a skateboard. Like whatever it is, it was for you growing up, whatever it is now, like we're constantly trying to master things and feel like we are good at them, feel like we are competent at them. When this box isn't checked, and when we try and try and try and try and try, and nothing ever happens, nothing shows from all of our effort, we start to feel helpless and ineffective. And I'll get to how, from a fitness standpoint and health standpoint, this plays a huge role from a belief in what you can do standpoint. But let's just keep going down the line first. So then we have autonomy, which focuses on alignment. When your thoughts, feelings, and actions are in unison together, basically when you bring your authentic self to the party, to an event, to any situation in life, your day, your life, that is more vibrant, it's more productive, and it's your best self. When you do things that aren't aligned with your thoughts, feelings, and your actions have a disconnect there, you're going to feel really frustrated. So obviously this gets into, I don't want to binge drink, or I don't want to eat the bag of chips, or I don't want to lay on the couch and do absolutely nothing when I know I should go to the gym. But then your actions don't align with that. Then the third piece, which is the tricky piece, is relatedness. So in other words, is the desire to feel like you belong, to feel connected with people, to have tribes, to have this belief that you are significant to other people. So we want to feel related. We want to be connected to people. So this is going to get threatened, for example, when we aren't connected to people. And this is where you see this really interesting game be played when you're trying to eat better, work out more, drink less. During those periods of time, rather than go and be social or put yourself in those situations, you just isolate yourself, right? Because you're trying not to drink. You're trying not to, get off the straight and narrow. So where you get this big clash is you have what you want to do. You have the autonomy part of your psychology being like, I want to do this. This is what is, this is what is truly me. But then you want to relate. You want to fit in. You want to not be the outcast. You don't want to be the weirdo. You don't want to be the person that doesn't have a drink in their hand. And you're weird. Why aren't you drinking, right? How many times have you heard that? It's like, oh, I am not drinking because right now I'm not drinking. So it's like you have to explain yourself why you don't want to be hungover, or why just for that specific moment in time you don't have a drink in your hand. And people will make you feel like an absolute alien if you are ever doing something that is different than what they're doing. They want you to do it so that they feel justified in their head. Oh, everyone else is doing it. I'm just like them, right? We all want to feel related, but we also want to have our own autonomy. We want to do what we want to do. This is where competence gets it just gets screwed over, man, because you're probably trying to improve yourself. You're probably trying to master your physique, your body, achieve your physical goals. But you can't because you're sacrificing your autonomy in an effort to have some relatedness. Let that sink in just for a second. You feel helpless, you feel ineffective because you are taking actions to relate to people rather than taking actions that are in alignment with your true thoughts and feelings and authentic self. So like that's pretty deep. That's pretty frustrating. And what do we do? What do you do when you want to fit in? You want to feel connected to people. You want to have friends. You want to be social. You want to be true to who you are, but you don't want those to conflict to the point to where you're not able to feel like you are competent in whatever it is that you're trying to do. Right? No one ever says, oh, I wish I drank more. The autonomy part of them is never like, oh, I wish I had had that 10th shot of brunettes. Why did I stop at 5? Right? Hangovers, low energy, a lack of physical progress in the gym, in the mirror. That all points to the frustration of drinking more than you intended, being more hungover than you meant to be, and not living up to what you truly want. The hard part is feeling connected with our friends, family, coworkers, whatever it is, knowing that drinking is such a fabric of social activity, and in most circles, electing not to drink is a quick way to be excluded, not invited, pointed out as the weirdo. So you're, like I said, left to reconcile your competence at reaching your fitness goals, whether it's a race and improving your time, losing 10 pounds, and it leaves you in this stalemate, leaves you feeling helpless. And so this is where these terms come from. I have bad genetics, right? You look in the mirror, I just have bad genetics. You see a new experience or a new challenge and you say, it's not worth it. Like, what's the point, right? You blame it on your metabolism. Like, it's out of the cards for me. I got a bad metabolism, right? And that's a sign that your competence has been frustrated and disrupted because you are allowing it to, you're basically giving away your power. You have the competency, you have the ability to master these challenges, but because you're more worried about feeling related than having your autonomy satisfied, you get into this situation where it's like, oh, well, I tried, but it didn't work. Whereas it does work, you just haven't consistently applied what you need to apply to it. And a lot of times, that is more autonomy. So ultimately, I have a bad metabolism, I have bad genetics, it's not worth it. Those are just excuses, stories that you tell yourself that your mind has run on loop for years so that you can let yourself off the hook. Because if you can't control it, it's out of your power, it's out of your hands, right? If you can't get to school because it snowed, shoot, I would have gone to class, but it snowed, so I had to stay home and sleep in, right? The snow is the out. The genetics is the out. Where it's like, you can do it, but you allow yourself to give away your power, so then you can go and fall back into what's comfortable. And I know this because I used to do it. I used to do it a lot. I used to say all the same things. I remember one time after going to the gym, like being so frustrated that I was almost to tears where I'm just like, why isn't this working? And it's like, I wanted to fit in and I was sacrificing levels of autonomy. At the time, I didn't really know what I truly wanted. So I think that was part of it. But I know what it's like to want to fit in. I still want to fit in. It's not like I'm like, hey, everyone go and hate me. Like, I want to fit in. I want to connect with you. I want to connect with you on this podcast, even if we might be a little bit different. But now I'm at a point where I don't want to do it so badly that I'm going to sacrifice my purpose and core values. And what happens, just to touch on this one last time, when you have your autonomy and you have that dissonance of what you're doing and what you want to do, it leads to this state of cognitive dissonance that's going to lead to chronic levels of sympathetic activation, which is a fancy way of saying chronic levels of stress, chronic levels of anxiety. It's a common response when you aren't doing what you know you can or should or is capable. Like you're basically, when you're not doing what you know you could be doing, should be doing, or are capable of, that's leading to a level of anxiety. Like think about, like, you put off your homework, you put off your laundry, you put off your work task, and you know it's coming, and you have this anxiety. It's coming. It's like, I should have been doing it. I should have been doing it. And the longer you don't go and do it, the bigger that anxiety gets. And what's sad is that the common response to mute this anxiety is drugs, medication, procrastination, like I was just mentioning, excessive eating, because it takes you from the state of, oh, I'm anxious, to, oh, like, I'm comfortable, I'm relaxed, I'm on the couch now. And then last but not least, alcohol, right? We're trying to mute that uncomfortable feeling that comes from not doing the things that we know we should be doing. Needing a drink really is just a symptom of needing to suppress the stress from the previous day. Like, you get done with work, you're like, oh, I need a drink. It's like, do you need a drink, or are you just stressed and you need some way to downregulate so that you're not stressed, right? So whether it's stress after work or being at a party and you finish your drink and you're like, oh, I need a drink in my hand. Like, that's anxiety that you're then trying to go and essentially suppress by having another drink. So there's two questions that, with some time and with some reflection and with some honesty with yourself, whether this is with a coach or with yourself, can really help you filter your decision making so you aren't getting in the way of what you really want in life. Number one, what are your core values, and do your actions align with them? And another way to frame this is, are the things that are important to me achievable with or without these actions? So a good example of this is, I want to be connected to my friends. I want to spend time connecting with friends. Do I need Facebook to do that? If I cut out Facebook, which is a social platform to connect with people, could I have deep, meaningful conversations and connections with people without Facebook, knowing that it is doing more harm than good, and cutting out my time, cutting out my depth, and cutting out my presence, right? So that's a question to ask yourself. Second one is, what is your bigger purpose for wanting to moderate, let's just say, nights out or the drinks you have on those nights? Because someone that is self-aware and clear on their purpose is going to be much more likely to stay in alignment with their goals more consistently than someone who is just chasing a numerical, I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to put on 10 pounds of muscle, or I want to increase my bench. Ultimately, wanting to lose weight or wanting to have whatever layer one surface level goal, it usually doesn't stack up to the desire to fit in, to the desire to cope, right? Those are big, strong emotions. Having a big, strong purpose is going to be something that can stand up against, whatever it is that you don't want to do. Like, I'm thinking of like Godzilla versus Kong. Like, you need a Godzilla for Kong. You don't need a little lizard for Kong. You need Godzilla. And sometimes wanting to lose 5 to 10 pounds, most of the time, because majority of the world and country, if you're in the United States, is overweight. So let's not pretend that like this isn't an issue for a big majority of the population. For most people wanting to lose 5 to 10 pounds, 10 to 15 pounds, it's not a big enough pain to do anything about it. So then the next step, you ask yourself these questions. Then you need some sort of tactics, some sort of tangible, here's what to do to actually build some momentum in that, rather than just using theory. Oh, you need to reflect, go meditate. Like, I hate it when people do that, when they're just like, oh, you struggle with this? Go do this esoteric thing with no direction and try and clear your mind. Like, that's going to get people absolutely nowhere. Give people a task, give people a mission, give people an exercise where it's like, okay, cool, I can wrap my head around that, and then you can go and actually start to do those things. Sorry, side tangent. But anyway, so I'm going to give you 4 practical tips to actually start to moderate alcohol consumption so that you can build some momentum, get clarity and purpose, and all these things. So first and foremost, own your nights out. Be intentional with your drinking is going to be 10 times better than just like, oh, the wind's blowing right, so I'll go right? If you go out and you're like, oh, I'm going to try not to drink, right? That's weak language. It's a poor effort. It's just a poor effort. I'll just call it that. If you say, oh, I'm going to try not to do this, it's like, you're going to end up doing it because you haven't even convinced yourself that you're not going to do it. You're straddling a fence, and it's just a matter of time before you fall completely over to the side that you're saying you're not trying to. So rather, like I said, own it. So if you're like, all right, I'm going out. My goal is to have 3 drinks. Boom. Then you have 3 drinks. that was your goal. That was your target. That was something that you were working towards. So you're not going to feel bad for hitting your goal, because what you do on the back end of that goal is you say, all right, my target's 3 drinks. I'm going to back out how I can fit in the rest of my nutrition, the rest of my training, the rest of whatever, knowing that this is something that I'm planning for, right? It's like setting money aside for college fund or vacation, rather than just being like, oh, I need to pay for college. Like, I didn't realize that. I've had a kid for 18 years. Like, who knew, right? Plan for it. Have some intention with it. And then, like, when you're doing it, celebrate. Like, this is something that's not in the article, but it's like a random Tuesday night, a poor reason to just get hammered. Like, your best friend's wedding, yeah, go enjoy life, celebrate life. If you win the Super Bowl, those are the best athletes in the world. They're getting after it. They're celebrating it. But there's a big difference between winning the Super Bowl or getting a promotion or getting engaged or whatever it is, and like, oh, I had a hard Thursday night. Like, I need to blow off some steam. Like, all right, good luck, right? So own it, be intentional about it, and be selective. Like, not every single night needs to be, Coachella. This, not that. So this is a super simple tactical one. Like I said, in the nutrition part, it's a numbers game with alcohol and weight loss. So if you are a tactical person and use a little bit of strategy, you can definitely start to build some momentum here. So I'm going to lay out just some simple numbers for you. Do it in your head, since you're probably listening to this in the car. Don't write it out. Let's say you have 5 Coors Lights. Coors Light, I think it's like 101 calories, so we'll just say it's 100 calories. 5 Coors Lights. The mountains are blue, ice cold. It's 500 calories. We're going to have 5 IPAs. I love good IPA, but you're looking at some 200 to 250 calories. So literally 5 beers. One is 500 calories. One is 1,250 calories. That's a 750 calorie difference over the course of weeks and months. That's literally 10 pounds right there. You can order 3 margaritas. Who knows how many calories are in those? We'll just say it's 400 calories, and you have those 3 margaritas, or you have 3 shots of Casamigos, and that's 240 calories, right? So 1,200, 240. So if you traded those 5 Coors Lights for your 5 IPAs, it's just like a little math one, on 20 different occasions, that's 15,000 calories. That is a significant difference in your weight, your body composition, and you can make a big crack in your weight loss just by changing the can you crack. That was written in. Really, really smart right there. So just some other quick tips. Light beer instead of ales. It's going to help make this transition a little bit easier. Order on the rocks or neat instead of mixed drinks. So don't drink your calories more than you need to. If you're getting the added Coke and the added, the sugary stuff that you get like in the mixer or whatever it is, like, you don't need that. Pro tip, get nice liquor. You'll sip it longer. You'll appreciate it more. You'll be more present in the conversations, and you'll save on cash in the long run. Because like I said, you can get 1 shot, 2 shots, something on the rocks, something nice, or you can have 5 shots of some trash, and it's like you can guess how the rest of the night's going to go. Number 3, this one takes a little bit more work, but it's definitely tactical. Get clear on your purpose. So if you're working to lose weight, right, this can definitely help you make better decisions, because like I said, wanting to lose weight isn't a strong enough emotional response to having like a deeper, bigger purpose. A lot of people want to lose weight, but that pain's not big enough. So instead, create, and really ultimately you got to find a compelling enough activity or journey or mission or purpose that replaces the same old obligations with new, healthier behavior. So really good example. I did this for years. I'm working on a side hustle, and I want to leave my 9 to 5 because I hate it. And so that is the reason why I'm going to moderate my alcohol and not be super hungover tomorrow, because I want to go and get after it at 6, 7, 8, 9 a.m., whenever it is. Let's say you got someone that you're spending time with the next day, and you want to be your best. Maybe it's your kid. Maybe it's your nephew. Maybe it's your grandma you haven't seen in a really long time. Maybe it's your parents. Remind yourself, like, hey, I want to be my best for that person, and they need me at my best. So I'm going to make sure that I can be at my best. There's a bigger purpose. We'll do things for other people that we won't do for ourselves. Good example of this from a fitness standpoint. I'm training for a marathon, or I'm training for some big, cool physical task that is going to take all of my effort, but that's going to be a bigger reason that you need to moderate so that you can crush your long run the next day than like, oh, like I want to work out. Like, wanting to work out is very different than training for a marathon. You got to be at your best for that marathon. Trust me. I actually once had a client that he loved painting, and he was like, hey guys, like, no thanks, I'm going to take it easy tonight, or I'm only having a few drinks tonight, I'm painting in my studio tomorrow. And like, that was his line. This is like this like cool bro in like the city. He's like, oh no, like I gotta take it easy. I'm painting in my studio. I was like, wow, like what a way to level up your mystery and seem so much cooler, which actually brings me to another point as like an added bonus. When you have a purpose or a bigger reason or something bigger going on than just Friday night, you're going to become 10 times more interesting to whoever it is that you're trying to attract, because people love people that have cool things going on or people that are really passionate about something. Why do you think people are so fascinated with athletes, artists, entrepreneurs? Those are all people that are chasing something bigger, and we envy that passion. And so if you have a bigger purpose and you go and articulate that, they're like, whoa, you're different. You have something that you're into. All of a sudden, you guys can get deeper, connect, and then I'll let you fill in the blanks. Next one, be the moon, not the tide. So actually, now that I'm looking at this, it's 5 tactical tips. So you guys are getting a bonus. Be the moon, not the tide. This one's super simple. There comes a point when you plant your tree and the roots grow so deep that you just don't move for other people. The moon is going to be what pulls the tide in the direction that it wants to go, and the tide follows the moon. So next time you and your friends are out, figuring out what to do, what should we do? It's Thursday night, what should we do? Boom, boom, boom. Pull them in the direction you want to go rather than getting pulled in theirs. Say, hey, let's go for a walk around the lake. Hey, let's go take this class. Hey, let's go work out. Rather than them saying, hey, let's go blah, 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 doing whatever is like out of your alignment, right? Number 4, be patient with yourself. So actually this is the last one. Number 4, be patient with yourself. So guess what? Even if you do everything that I mentioned in the article from a tactical standpoint and you wrap your head around this completely, you're still going to mess up. You're still going to get really drunk. You're still going to be hungover. That's okay, right? You're human. That's what it's like to be human. You're not going to be perfect. I don't want you or anyone to be perfect. Like I said at the beginning of this article, this isn't an indictment on alcohol. This isn't don't drink. This is a recalibrated approach to moderation, all right? And there's going to be times you overshoot, undershoot, whatever. Just get back on the horse. So change is going to take time, and recognize that anytime you have habits that have been ingrained for years, you're not changing your toothpaste or like learning to put the toilet seat down. That's like trying to turn a jet ski around. Like you can turn a jet ski on a dime. You're looking at a cruise ship, and it takes a little while to turn a cruise ship around. But when you do, you're going to have so much more momentum going the direction that you want to go. So when you fall short, and you will, I do, dust yourself off, get up, recommit. This is the last little conclusion. So this is the end. Thank you for sticking on with me. But if you have been listening along this entire time, I'm going to assume to some degree you're either intrigued or inspired to make a change, or you know someone that you feel like this podcast would benefit. So I also know that most people, despite good intentions, will talk themselves out of making this shift or a shift, any shift that takes people out of their comfort zone. The reason is going to be doubt. So if you're thinking to yourself, this sounds way too hard, let me just realign you for a second. Playing scratch golf is really hard. Hitting a 95-mile-an-hour fastball is really hard. Singing a floater in the key over Giannis, who's like 6'10", I think, huge wingspan, is incredibly hard. Insert any kind of crazy feat. That's hard. You have what it takes to make this shift right now. It's a mental shift. It's not a physical capability shift. If you're worried it'll work for you, I can promise you that you are not a special alien. The scientific principles apply to everyone. It's likely that you haven't tried the approaches that were rooted in science and you've tried some sort of crazy marketing BS, or you did try them, you just didn't apply them consistently or long enough. Like I said, change takes time. Ultimately, the doubt that you're feeling is your subconscious recognizing that you're about to step outside of your comfort zone. It's your ego attempting to keep you safe and not having to go out and face whatever big scary thing there is out there. And while it might seem safe to stay where you're at and not challenge the status quo, I invite you to recognize that people stay in undesirable situations all the time because it's familiar, not because it's what they truly want. Most people would rather be safe and familiar and be miserable than step into the unknown, embrace fear, and live an exceptionally unique life. All you have to do is mentally walk yourself over the bridge and leave the older version behind you. A true steak, which is, again, from this article, would plant C4 on the bridge and blow it up, knowing that there's no going back over the bridge. And when you do, you'll perform better in the gym or your respective sports. Your physique will have more muscle and less fat on it. You'll feel better in your gut, joints, and brain, and you'll have more vigor to achieve the things in your life that truly matter to you. So with that, I'll leave you with 2 calls to action. 1, if you're crushing it, share this with someone that you know is capable of crushing it, and you guys can crush it together. If you're like, damn, I'm ready to crush it, and you want to work together, you can go to elementalcoachingproject.com. You can click the link in the show notes, sign up for a coaching application, and we can just have a conversation as to where you're at. If the coaching program is a good fit for you, I can walk you through what that looks like, and we can start making change. And if not, because here's the thing, I'm not the coach for everyone, or it might be something that's way out of my scope. At least you're taking the action to make a change, and I can refer you to someone that can help you. The big thing, and anyone that I'm working with, is I want you to feel 100% aligned on the process and what you're doing that is going to get you from A to Z, that's going to change your life and transform how you show up day to day, and ultimately get the most out of this joyride around the earth as you can. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I'll catch you next time on the Mindful Muscle Podcast.